Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Sam Murley with PTC, and I'll be our moderator today for this panel. The topic of conversation today is mixed reality and manufacturing industry opportunities. As manufacturing organizations look to gain any competitive edge to improve workplace productivity, it's critical that they focus on their most valuable asset, their employees. Digital advantages that can scale quickly, such as augmented and mixed reality, are making it easier than ever for organizations to enhance the employee experience by giving them tools that help them learn quickly and do their jobs more efficiently. By fostering a more dynamic work culture, dividends can be seen throughout an organization in the forms of improved quality and yield, increased and improved safety, and reduced scrap and rework, among various other business objectives. And what this all means for organizations and the workforce around the world, how it's helping organizations reduce costs, increase revenues, and accelerate new business models, that's our topic for today. We have three themes we're going to hit on during the session today. Theme 1, use cases and business impact. Theme 2, how to build a successful business use case. Theme 3, how to deploy and sustain healthy adoption and the importance of human-centric change management. I'm really excited. Thanks for joining us. I hope you all are excited as well. And we have 4 terrific panelists and experts to talk to us about these areas, and each bring a very unique perspective and wealth of knowledge around implementing and deploying augmented and mixed reality to drive real-world results. Without further ado, let's get them introduced and dive right in. Andreas, I want to come to you to kick us off with introductions.
Yes, thank you, Sam. Yeah, my name is Andreas Oeder. I'm a product manager from Airbus in Germany. Obviously, you hear this, is that I'm not a native speaker, so sorry for that. But so my person, I started with mixed reality in 2012. So we introduced our first system for big scale industrial parts in 2013 into production. Then I went to become a project manager for topics around worker augmentation. And I deal in general with mixed reality topics, assisted reality topics, remote assistance, voice assistance topics, and mobile process assistance. This is mainly what we deal with in terms of application and devices end to end.
Awesome. Almost a decade of experience. Can't wait to get into some of these topics with you and others. Andy, you want to go next?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Andrew Brokaw. My title is Manager of Virtual and Augmented Reality Simulation at C&H Industrial. I've been with the company for a little over 10 years now, doing a mix of different types of XR type simulations, virtual and augmented and mixed reality. Our team, the team I am responsible for, is responsible for coordinating the workflow and how we best use virtual and augmented reality technologies throughout the design process. We're heavily kind of centered in the product development type organization, so engineering and that type of product development, but we've kind of expanded beyond that. So now it's not just product development, we're supporting the manufacturing sites and their use, even down the line towards training and sales. So we kind of spread the gamut of all the use cases of XR type technologies.
Great to have you, Andrew. Zohair, you want to go next?
Sure, thanks, Sam. So my name is Zohair Mehkri. I'm a part of Flex. I'm a director of engineering, and I currently lead the space of different technologies such as augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and simulation technologies. I've been in the space for a little over 5 years, been in Flex for a little over 10 years, and our team is responsible for evaluating, defining, developing, deploying AR, VR, and MR solutions across the company. So it's a pleasure to be here today. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course. Can't wait to dive in on some of those specifics with you here shortly. And last but not least, Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben Atwater with Nestle Purina Pet Care Company. I'm on the digital manufacturing team, specifically within innovation. My responsibility is to explore and screen new technologies that we look at to solve business problems. I am the mobility lead subject matter expert for manufacturing within Purina. I've been with the company for 29 years. Really, I report up in through the business. Used to be in IT, so I'm a reformed IT guy, if you will. So I've got both backgrounds within business and within a technical IT background.
Great. So introduction's done. And if I'm doing my math correctly, collectively over 50 to 60 years on this panel right now of industry expertise, actually, going through the motions of developing the business case, focusing on specific use cases and driving action out into the frontline workforce to improve their day-to-day and the business impact. So this is pretty exciting. We're going to go right into theme 1, use cases and business impact. And this first question, actually the next 2 topics or questions, we're going to have everyone jump in. So Andreas, I want to start with you first. What are your leading use cases and why specifically did you focus on these use cases?
Yeah. For mixed reality, really, the driver in the beginning was for us to go for quality checks, because in our industry, of course, quality is first, because quality is safety at the end as well. And passenger safety needs to be guaranteed. So we started really to check in the beginning our brackets, which are thousands of, and obviously there's a big chance either to mount the wrong bracket or do it in the wrong direction, or just have a damage in that. And in the beginning, we did really our checks with paper, or as well with computers, bring them to the shop floor, and then we found out, okay, augmented reality is really a big pro in order to do that, and will save a lot of time and increase the quality, and directly enables us to create reports out of these tasks. And the driver was, of course, increasing quality and lead time reduction here. Later on, we thought, okay, couldn't it be better to install instead of to take care that the installation is right first time? And this is really where we want to go. So it's to bring the highest quality and the highest safety from the very first try to install something, and reduce really checking frequency. The second thing is really about remote assistance. Of course, a big driver is here that we can reduce travel time. So imagine you have an issue with a production machine, then it is quite easy that you just call the expert from the supplier, get him on the phone, and he can see what you can see, and you can much easier fix the problem and reduce the time to fix it. So it's not only travel time, but as well the time before you can go live again with machine, which saves, of course, the production time. And a big driver was as well COVID last year. So to overcome the really travel, the problems with traveling, it was quite good that we were able to provide our customers as well a system that they can do some checks during the production process from remote. And so this was really a driver to push the topic of remote assistance and remote expertise in our company.
Very, very interesting. Okay, so kind of COVID is acting as an accelerator, and maybe still an accelerator, but I caught some things there around time savings, quality improvement, maybe driving cost of quality down, maximizing expertise around the globe, and reducing some travel costs, maybe some of those impacts, which we're going to get into here shortly. Andy, I want to go to you with that same question: leading use cases, and why are you, the team, and the organization focusing on those?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Sam. I will say that, I mean, some of our use cases match to what Andreas has been talking about. I will say that when we started using this type of technology, we started kind of from the opposite end of the product life cycle, I will say. We kind of went early in the life cycle. We were looking more towards product validation, virtual prototyping, things like that. So our ideal was to be able to use these technologies to, in some ways, and as best as possible, replace the physical prototypes and to do as much testing as we can on these prototypes using AR, VR, whatever we can in order to create a realistic prototype that we can then test with. So we kind of went to that early part of the design process when we're still in kind of the engineering phases. We want to be able to create a physical or a virtual prototype that we can view in AR and walk around and interact with and maybe test out maintenance procedures before we ever actually build anything. And so we kind of started from that aspect. And we always looked at, for us, a return on investment related to that was very much related to the reduction in number of prototypes. So we looked at if we can do this very well, how much physical testing can we essentially eliminate? I mean, we'll never eliminate all the physical testing, but we want to be able to limit it down to what is absolutely necessary to be done in the physical. I mean, like you said, that eliminates rework, eliminates scrap of the material, things like that. So that is kind of where we looked at starting with this. Because we also do a lot of simulation work. We work a lot with our ergonomic simulations teams. So we work with them to simulate how a user is going to interact with a machine. And the benefit of that being now we don't have to wait for the machine to be built to be testing out user experience, to user interaction. So we test that out early in the design process using whatever XR type technologies we can, whether that's headsets or whether that's body tracking, things like that. We try to test out how the user experience is going to be impacted by any changes we're making in the design. So we don't have to wait all the way to the physical prototype to find out the users don't like whatever changes we've made. So kind of that was where we started. We have moved also into kind of that manufacturing space of getting more information into the hands of the people who are assembling the components for training them on how to operate on the manufacturing line. So we've reduced time for training and reduced cost and investment for any mistakes made and things like that. So yeah, a lot of what kind of Andreas has mentioned, kind of we're working on that as well, but from the opposite end of the product development spectrum, yeah, we're kind of looking at simulating the best possible virtual prototype we can and working with that.
Got it. Okay. Trying to kind of engineer, I'll use engineer again, but engineer out maybe the future need, right? Or engineering out future risks, maybe process gaps or bottlenecks. Very, very interesting. Gonna come back to you here in a second and say what, out of all those outcomes, what's one of those business impacts that you think has been the most advantageous within those use cases? Speaking of manufacturing though, Zohair, I want to come to you on the same question. Leading use cases and why are you and the team and the organization focusing on those today?
Absolutely, and I would say that it aligns pretty similar to Andrew here, because we also went through the product life cycle, right? We looked at the product life cycle from the beginning of design all the way to the end of life of the product. And that was really what guided us on what kind of applications to focus on. So in the beginning, it was design collaboration, being able to use VR to collaborate in a virtual environment for the design of products or design of manufacturing environments. As we move along, we have remote assistance, much like Andreas and Andrew. It was because when we started the actual product or the manufacturing of it, you run into problems. Naturally, there are issues that come up. And so you have to have the people at the right spot at the right time. And that always can't happen within a matter of minutes. But with AR, VR, in this case specifically, we used augmented reality. Having an application, even on your phone, being able to use remote assistance to annotate in real world environments proved of huge value. So what was the value? If you look at that, that one may not be monetary in the beginning. It will be something like time. So traveling from one country to another country around the world may take up to a day or more, whereas we were being able to have support provided on the spot instantaneously, and that was a huge gain. And then obviously that starts to translate into dollars, right? Because the less amount of time that you have where things aren't working, they are working, and you're being able to deliver higher quality products to your customers. So moving along, we started to set up work instructions. We started to look at how AR can be used on the manufacturing floor when products are being built, for warehousing, for maintenance and support, for servicing our machines. So it started to become very widespread because of the fact that you can start using AR/VR depending on the nature of the technology in its own way, for its own strengths in a process, right? So then the KOIs or the metrics that you're using to determine success become dependent on the application that you're trying to optimize, and so they can range anywhere from something as simple as time to something as impactful as even revenue, right? So it can vary and it depends, but that also inspired how we identified and how we pursued our use cases.
Got it. Love the level 1, kind of level 2 value impacts. So again, going to come back and maybe see if there's something there specific in a few minutes that you want to highlight or dive into more details on. But Ben at Purina, the IT person converted now to digital transformation lead. Tell us about your use cases and why the team and the company are focusing on those.
Sure. So, similar stories to the other 3 panelists and what we've talked about. COVID lockdown really drove the need for process change because we couldn't have people on site, we couldn't travel. And that really, I was tasked with identifying a way of having that remote assistance and trying to find a tool that was easy to use. Our 3 specific use cases that we focused in on is commissioning of new equipment. So we were, capacity expansion projects where we have new equipment, they're installed, the pieces of equipment are installed, and then we need to have the manufacturing expert involved in the final tuning and commissioning of that equipment. And that was not practical with a standard phone call through Teams or something like that. We needed to have a way to be able to view it and look at what our maintenance technicians or our engineering people were having to deal with. And assisted reality really helped with that. Similar vein is the design of new equipment, where we had a team of experts around the world that needed to contribute to the design of a piece of equipment with a manufacturer. We're able to use remote assistance again to accomplish that. And then the final one that we keyed in on was process audits, quality audits, even inventory audits, where we're able to use the remote assistance capability, live video streaming in a safe way. And the focus here is on safe, because we had to have the ability for hands-free and working in the environment and not put our associates at risk.
Okay. So some kind of business continuity there, safety. And I think, Ben, let's stick with you and go right into which you've highlighted a few already, but any leading, as folks are sitting here and we think about maybe they're just planning or they're in phase 1 or phase 2, or maybe they're thinking about scaling in their own organization. The big question is, well, how do you cash this out? How do you take advantages of the business impacts, whether it's time, revenue, cost reduction or driving uptime? And so we'll go kind of in reverse here. Ben, is there one, business outcome that you want to call out, you want to articulate, qualitative, quantitative, from the work done there so far?
I think qualitatively, well, actually quantitatively. So from a cost savings standpoint, you can look at, and this is an easy low hanging fruit, it's the reduced travel. Okay. If people don't have to travel to a facility, as Andre indicated, or I think it was Andre, talking about having to travel halfway across the world, and eliminating that and allowing people to be more productive sooner. The value add there is that 1, it reduced costs, and 2, it accelerates the commissioning process or the process of bringing that equipment online or solving that problem that you have without having to bring that expert on site. Okay. That's a great insight.
Zohair, let's come back to you. You talked about bridging the gap between design and manufacturing. You hit on that as well. Again, in the kind of the list of impacts and things that the company is realizing through some of these activities, just like Ben, is there one that sticks out that is really, really easy to hook into and point to other qualitative things that you've seen, from a driving success perspective? What are your insights there?
Absolutely. I would say there's a few that there's numerous as if you look at each use case, but if you look at a high level, One of the things I think we noticed was what we call the decentralization of expertise, right? When you had centers of excellence across the world that specialized in a certain area, traditionally speaking, even though there's technology, we still do have places in the world that may not travel or be accessed as frequently as others. And so what happens is that you end up creating what we call tribal knowledge, right? You have a certain set of principles and traditions and customs that are very knowledgeable in nature, and they kind of stay where they are. And with this technology, when you started to really decentralize that, we started to find other people across different disciplines. It doesn't have to be in a different location geographically. It can even be different functions or different disciplines or different groups of people in the same department, for example, starting to really see the other side of the coin, if you will, and start to learn different types of skills and different types of expertise from each other. And that opened up a lot of what we started to see in terms of knowledge sharing. And of course, like Andreas said, COVID accelerated a lot of that, but I would say that we did see that happening where people were just being able to get onto a platform and just start sharing, right? And that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, yep. Interesting you mentioned the department to department, because that first piece you're pulling on there is maybe from a task or execution perspective, but also what I just took away and wrote down was it's almost creating or making the digital thread a reality. And if we can knowledge share between departments, whether it's kind of ad hoc or previously curated information, I think that's really interesting from a maximizing the business impact perspective that maybe one department goes and figures out and creates. And now with 5% of the effort or whatever, now it gets maximized around the organization. So very, very interesting, and going to come back to you and others here shortly on those tech recipes and kind of best practices as you see them. But before we jump to that, Andrew, I want to come to you on, again, the list of impacts that you were thinking through when you were talking about your use cases. And is there one that sticks out or that has been really advantageous and that the organization is hooked on there as a result?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Zohair and Ben hit on a really good point, a point I wanted to mention as well, is that bringing those experts together in a quick and easy way, as opposed to traveling, like you said, or as opposed to even Teams calls. When you're in sort of a more immersive environment where you can really discuss the product in a way where you're all viewing it, interacting with it at the same time, that can really, really help you in terms of the decision-making process. So part of that going down the line is part of that for me is the enhanced ability to make quicker decisions in terms of product changes, in terms of needs, but also to make more decisions that are better related to the product in terms that you have more information available to you in order to make the decision for the change. So if something is going wrong on a specific design, you can get design engineers from multiple different locations who are responsible for multiple different sub-assemblies of that component, put them all together in an immersive environment and say, okay, talk to each other and work out this problem. And it's better than sending emails back and forth. It's better than a Teams meeting where someone's just sharing one screen, because everyone can interact, everyone can look from various viewpoints and say, hey, I see something over here that might be an issue. Do you want to look at it? And then you get all these experts together essentially in the equivalent of one room. That's the benefit, is they're all together in one room as opposed to each disjointed separate locations. So between the lack of travel necessary for them, which saves obviously time and money on that, but also the decision making ends up being enhanced as a result of that, I think is a big improvement we've definitely seen from that.
Okay, I was going to ask you a follow up, but you hit on it. For those types of use cases and advantages, a lot of times folks may say, well, how is this different than Teams, and how is this different from maybe even video-based solutions? And really, I think what I'm hearing from you, or we're hearing from you, is when you need to go one step beyond that and get physical proximity and context, you lose that obviously in 2D video. You may be able to get it, but not to the extent where you can get that type of experience, different perspectives instantaneously through something like augmented reality design reviews. So So that's a great perspective, and going to come back to you as well on kind of those tech recipes that you're seeing drive some of that success. Before we go though, Andreas, I want to come to you as well. You mentioned quality. You mentioned a few things when you were going through your use cases. One that's been leading that you've hooked into, or any qualitative results as well that you want to share.
Yes, thank you. Perhaps first to come back, what you just said with the tools, why not just using Teams for remote assistance? Most of the tools are really made especially for remote assistance. They have some other tools that like virtual laser pointer, for example, or having the ability to make online annotations or even AR annotations, which is quite a big improvement if you want to reuse afterwards what you found. So if you think about the world anchors, for example, where you can put some annotations. But just to coming back to what you just said regarding our use cases, I said we did start especially with quality checks in the beginning, and here I mentioned, okay, we had paper drawings in the beginning, we used computers, brought it there, and now with the augmented reality we have really the possibility to make the data preparation, so the preparation of the digital mock-up really on station level. So we can just create the data which is needed to be checked on a specific station, which makes it much easier to find really issues or to make 100% check of what has to be built in at this station. And so we can really avoid that we have to do later on rework. If we can reduce rework, we can reduce cost and increase quality, of course. And here again, we have the savings in the travel cost, because it's very expensive if we need to send our workers to do the rework then in another plant at the end. So this is really helping, and I think really a big advantage of this kind of procedures which we can offer our workers.
Got it. Okay. Some very good insights there. Great. So let's move to, which is part of what we just talked about, right? Building up the business case. Of course, line of sight to what's the business impact potential of what do we know it can be? What are we really positive or maybe unsure and want to test out? But there's so much more. And as we were talking and preparing for this panel, there's so many great things that you all brought to the discussion around building up the business case. And two individuals that really had some good things to talk about there. So Ben, I want to come to you on this next question first, and then Zohair next. Building up the business case. How do you go about building up the business case? What are the things that you need to make happen internally, maybe externally, that's in addition to what's the business impact potential going to look like? Ben, thoughts on that and guidance for the attendees?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Sam. So the first thing that's really key here is that you need to focus on what the problem is that you're solving. And once you have a clear definition of that problem, then you go about going, okay, my solution could be any one of a number of things. So how do I get there? And sometimes it's a procedural change, or it could be a technology change. In the case of a technology change, then you need to look at what the cost of that technology is versus the cost that, it's a basic cost equation, business value. Once you go there, then you start you're working on we call it socializing, or that's internal. Find a key stakeholder to support that. But there's stakeholders. You need to not only focus on that executive level, but all the levels all the way down to the end user. The end users are actually your most important stakeholder that you need to focus on. Without their buy-in and support, it doesn't matter how good the solution might be or the potential it might have. If they don't buy into it, it's done. It's dead. Everybody I'm sure has experienced projects like that where they thought they had a great solution, but sometimes I think what ends up happening is the emphasis is on the technology instead of the problem. All right, and it's really, really key to focus on the people, the problem, and the technology is just there to enable the solution.
Great perspective. Couldn't agree more. And I see Zohair smiling and laughing and shaking his head when you mention too much of a focus maybe on technology versus solving a problem. Zohair, I want to come to you on the same question. How do you think about those things? And then any other things that you do when you're building up a business case for a program, such as one that includes, augmented and mixed reality?
I think Ben answered it. I mean, it's a tough act to follow. But I was thinking of two other areas that we look at is first, not the first one in the business case, but one additional area is how to measure the success of the project, right? Obviously, you start with a problem statement, and you have to make sure that you're matching the technology correctly. But how are you measuring whether or not you're being successful? And sometimes we perceive that just having the technology means that you're successful, but that may not be true, right? I mean, just having something doesn't mean that it's good or bad. You have to be able to judge how it was able to make an impact, and that could be qualitatively or quantitatively. But impact has to be measured, so the KOI, KPI, whatever that you're using, has to be clearly defined. And the second thing I would say is that you have to allow for flexibility. Sometimes when we introduce a new technology, especially when the technology may not be mature or maybe constantly changing over time, especially something that's newer, you have to be aware and be essentially planning for that things will change as time goes along. So if your business case is really baked in, it's really set in stone, then that can actually be a limitation to the deployment of technology, because then you start to put yourself into a box. And so you really have to articulate that properly to the stakeholders, like Ben is saying, and that has to be the users as well as the executives and sponsors, that things may change, that things will change as they go along. You kind of have to roll with it because the technology is changing, and so it causes you to have to be a bit more flexible. But other than that, I think really when you start to create that entire that structure, things start to fall into place as you move along.
Okay, so here, follow up for me. When you're thinking about, I think you call them KOIs, or those metrics. Is there anything that you do pre, during, and post a program or phases to then measure differences, improvements, lack thereof? Anything you want to share there?
Absolutely. Some KOIs. One other note to include there is that depending on that application, right, the KOI may differ. But one KOI that may not seem like it's measurable is something that Ben actually already mentioned, is the user. When we start to roll new technologies, it's common for people to want to appease the decision makers. But you sometimes don't focus on the user as much, because you're trying to make sure that the project is successful, but you're not actually looking at what the user needs and what they want. So the KOI can start being driven by that. So that can be things such as time, productivity, efficiency, and all of those are numerical. And so if you're looking at the KOI specifically, we would say that the user defined KOIs would be how you can kind of drive that discussion. Okay,
that's a great insight. Let's tweak or shift gears a little bit and go into tech recipes. So off the heels of needing to be flexible and agile, but yeah, at the end of the day, you've got to have a tech recipe that you think is going to drive success. So Andreas, I want to come to you on this question, and then Andrew next. What are those, we'll call them digital recipes for AR and mixed reality that you are applying to these use cases that drive this impact? Is there anything there you can share about kind of some consistency, or maybe specific products or devices for specific use cases?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so perhaps for the 3D and the use of augmented reality in production, either for quality checks, but as well later on for installation guidance. I think the most important thing here is the preparation of data, of course, to make it as easy and consistent as possible, because the consistency of the data is, of course, very important. And to provide the user really the means to have a clear view on what he has to do. And for this, you can use different devices. Yeah? So if it is not necessary to work hands-free, we provide our workers tablets to use augmented reality with the help of so-called sensor packs. Yeah, so to make the overlay and the camera and the registration of the 3D and the real world. Or we use, of course, HoloLens-like devices and provide them really, all information what they need at the right place, right in front of their eyes, so that they can work hands-free. The same is for remote assistance. Our first approach was make it as easy as possible. So provide a software which is more or less platform or device agnostic, and so that we can use it on smartphones, tablets, or on different glasses. Yeah, so when we have use cases like remote checks of something, then we just use the smartphone on the gimbal, yeah, and make the workaround and make it easy for the worker, which is in the shop floor, to show what he sees, and make it possible for the auditor in the back really to point somewhere where he has to focus on. Or if it is really a maintenance guy who needs both hands, of course, then we provide some glasses, industrial glasses, in order to make him more free working. And last but not least, our idea is as well to work without graphical user interfaces. So the idea is to use voice assistants, if it is possible. So for some use cases, this is really feasible, and we got the feedback from proof of concepts that it is well received by our workers, and they can really imagine to work more with this kind of application than at the end.
Very interesting. Right. One could imagine that type of interface being more acceptable, especially when you've got a head-worn device on, maybe that doesn't have a trackpad or some way of, engaging fingers to keyboard. So very interesting. You mentioned something else there too, I think was on the analytics side. So being able to capture and analyze information. Are you all hooking in analytics and thinking about that in the future as well as part of the tech recipes?
Yeah. So for sure, it's important that we are able to, so all the information which we can gather with the augmented reality tools, we are immediately able as well to create from our quality checks, or as well from the installations, documentation. And of course, we can feedback all information which we put into such a device, or which we exchange as well with a voice assistance tool quite easily into a machine learning engine, and reuse it later on, and which is not possible today. Yeah, so if you do paperwork, a lot of information from discussions, searching for something is simply lost. And if you search for something with the help of a device or a software like really a voice assistant, and then you can really reuse this information and find out where are really the problems. So
okay,
quite important. Mm-hmm.
Great summary. Andrew, I want to come to you next on the digital recipes and how you're thinking about that.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I like what Andreas said a lot about having different types of technology available for different use cases. Kind of what I was thinking kind of builds off of that. I mean, I see the tech recipe partially as not just what technology is used for what use cases, but kind of making sure that you have all the information necessary before beginning a project in determining what the user wants out of the end. So, I mean, a big instinct, I mean, I would say early on, a big instinct of mine would be just to jump into AR and just be like, here's a full virtual prototype. Go do what you want to do. But then you get the users who are looking at it like, well, I'm not sure. I have a full machine now sitting in front of me. What do I do with it? So trying to early when someone comes with me with a project, trying to early get all the information necessary before jumping in and then just jumping into a full virtual prototype, making sure that they know what they want out of it in terms of if they're looking for design changes, if they're looking for a training scenario, making sure they kind of tightly know what they want out of it. And that a lot of times entails teaching them about what the technology can do. Because we run into this with new projects all the time. People come and they're like, oh, we could do a virtual prototype. It's like, yes, we can do that, but you can do it for a lot of different purposes and a lot of different reasons. So what do you want out of this prototype? And that will tailor kind of how we build it and how your experience is going to go. So kind of then from then on, once you get all that information, then being able to decide what technology you want to use, similar to what Andreas said, having options there, whether they want to do full body tracking for an ergonomic simulation. You find out ahead of time they really want to know kind of how a user interacts with the machine. Well, you can do a full body tracking, track how the user's doing a maintenance procedure or something, and get data back from that based on like stresses and forces on the body, things like that. If they want to do a study of, they want to know, okay, we have an operator driving in the field, will they be able to see everything around them? Then, okay, well, we have a head-mounted display. We can put you in the cab and evaluate visibility all around. So kind of tailoring the solution as best as possible to what they really want out of it, rather than just giving them a virtual prototype and saying go. That's failed on many times in the past. I mean, we've done that. Initially, we're like, okay, here's your full machine in virtual, and then they don't know what to do with it because they're like, well, I could walk around here, I can grab this component there. They don't understand kind of really where you get the benefit out of it. So using our experience to say, okay, this is the results you want. These are the best technologies to use going for it. But in order to do that, we have to have all that information ahead of time. So I will say one of the best recipes is really getting as much information as possible from that project before jumping into the technology. Your instinct is to jump in and just go, but you really kind of need to tailor the solution as best as possible. So getting that information up front, I think, is important before starting.
Yeah, great point. A couple years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe not a whole lot to choose from a headset perspective. And now there's so much to choose from. And great point on what's the recipe. Well, tell me what you're hungry for, and we'll put that order in together. Love that perspective. Let's dive into theme 3 around sustaining healthy adoption and the importance of human-centric change management. Zohair, I want to come to you first and then Ben, but I attached on to what you were talking about earlier on the KOIs and keeping it people-centric. Maybe with that, but what else have you been able to drive to change the hearts and the minds? And what are other things that you do when it comes to the people-centric side of adopting technology?
Absolutely, and this is a topic that we could talk about for hours. We call it. I personally call it product psychology, right? Because there's a lot of psychology that comes into change management as a whole. When you're looking at just changing an organization, there's a lot of psychology that needs to be incorporated into it. But when you start talking about products or technologies, then that product psychology is a very fundamental component that we have to understand, because when you're trying to introduce something new, a new technology, how you're introducing it and who you're introducing it to, and what are you really trying to bring a value of, all of those things factor into it. But you have to really understand who you're targeting. You have to understand what process you're changing. In the beginning, and this is something that we're okay with admitting to ourselves, is that when we started to bring AR VR into our organization, we were seeing low adoption because there were a number of different solutions and alternatives to technology, right? So why do you need AR VR? Why do you need AR, for example, if the application that you're trying to develop already exists, but the only difference is that now it's in quote unquote AR. So what's that value that it brings? And so you have to really dive deep into the mind of people, of users, of consumers. And that doesn't have to be a consumer like you and I, but it has to be a consumer in our environment, right? A consumer can be someone that's a decision maker in our business, or someone that's a knowledge worker or a frontline worker. And so how are they consuming, and what is important to them? So when we introduce a new technology, what are we helping them with? What are we optimizing? A lot of people like to use the examples of cell phones and mobile devices as good examples, right? I mean, you didn't really need to make a phone call before when you were around, but now it seems like you always have to be on the phone. So what are we adding? What value are we really bringing to a person's life, and to their workday, right? So the product psychology piece, that human change management, becomes a much deeper discussion, and you can go as deep as you want into it, and we really started to become psychologists almost at a certain point, saying, you know, what do people really like to interact with? Why do people like to consume information in a certain way, in a certain environment, at a certain time of day? And so how can we make that better, or how can we replace it so that it's more efficient? And then how do we make sure that it's adoptable, right? Just because you come up with something better doesn't mean it's going to be accepted. So you really have to think about, you know, when you're changing the organization, you have to think about who you're changing and why, and in which direction, right? So it's a big topic, but a very necessary one when it comes to this kind of a technology. Yep,
couldn't agree more. Ben, anything you have to add to that?
I'm not sure I can. No. Zohair, great start there. Just add on to layer onto this a little bit. So, you know, Zohair keyed into some very important points. There's a psychology of change, the behavioral science behind change is absolutely paramount. And it's like the last thing that people think about, if they think about it, when they're introducing a new technology change. I think the other thing too that you need to consider is the audience. So, you know, you've got, you know, what are we doing? Who's doing it, and why are we doing it? You need to answer all of those questions from the perspective of the end user, because they need to understand why this is better for them, because it's a change, and change is hard. It takes time. It takes building new habits, and there's got to be a reason for doing that. It's got to be an improvement and not change for change's sake, because I've got this cool new whiz-bang technology thing. I think somebody said earlier about, you know, just because we have AR doesn't mean you should do it. That's Andy said that, and sometimes we fall into that trap. It's like, okay, we've got this new solution, and gosh, it looks really neat. But the user's like, so what? I still have to get the widgets cranked. I have to get them out the door. All right, how does this make my job easier? How can I do it more safely? And moving along those lines, then there needs to be more time spent on the user experience, how they use those applications, those technologies. If you think about a smartphone, you know, every day, or our tablets, you know, you use an app and you try an app out, and if it doesn't behave the way you think it should, or it doesn't, you know, it makes you uncomfortable, you don't feel like you can back out or change things, you just stop using it because there's resistance. What you want is to put in solutions that have no resistance for the user, so that they can focus on the job at hand.
Good additions, and yes, we could have spent 45 minutes or an hour probably just on that topic, but let's do this 10 seconds or less around the horn before we close it out. Ben, coming back to you, what do you think the future holds?
I think the future holds, we're on the cusp of getting past the awkward phase with the augmented reality, virtual reality, assisted reality, because it's still clunky. The tools, they kind of mostly sort of fit, but it still takes a little bit of work. We're almost to the point where we have a friction-free environment.
I like it. Andrew, 10 seconds. What does the future hold?
Yeah, I mean, I really subscribe to the idea of that the digital twin is going to be very important, especially going forward with AR and MR and XR. Essentially, being able to have all that information available in one location, in like an augmented reality setting or something, from the physical machine, from the virtual simulations, all of it available, kind of on your device, available right to you. I think that's going to be pretty huge going forward. So kind of like a digital twin integration to XR.
Okay, Zohair, what does the future hold?
Just to be short and sweet, I would say I think it holds an increase of immersive computing.
Okay, I like it. Andreas, last but not least, what do you think the future holds?
Yeah, I agree completely with Andy, because I think the digital twin is really the concept which has to come. And for me, especially, I hope that we are able to provide our workers really contextual information whenever he needs it for his task. Yeah, so that's it.
Great quick perspectives on what the future may hold. So everyone that was here today, thanks for joining our session, and we're going to go to the live Q&A next. Please don't hesitate, though, to reach out to these panelists on LinkedIn or a platform of choice to continue the conversation on some of these topics. And on behalf of PTC, it's been a pleasure to be part of EWTS again and host this panel. Hope to catch you all in the live Q&A shortly, and have a great rest of the day.